The Alberta separatist movement seems to be growing to some degree, with many Albertans tired of not having their voices heard in Ottawa. Joining me now via Skype is Peter Downing, a former member of the RCMP and the Canadian Armed Forces. He's now the leader of Wexit Alberta. Not Brexit, but Wexit, a group that wants to separate from Canada and form its own country. And by the way, he's pulled over right now. That's why he's not wearing a safety belt. Peter, welcome to BCN.
Thank you for having me today, Hal.
Now, Peter, a recent online survey conducted by Research Co. shows around 30% of Albertans believe the province would be better off as its own country. Why are some Albertans wanting out?
Well, a number of reasons. If you look at the oil downturn, the price of oil, obviously that's our bread and butter of our economy in Alberta. We lost over 100,000 jobs in that time, and we've been kicked on every side, whether it be through pipeline moratoriums with Bill C-69, tanker bans with Bill C-48, a completely unfair equalization program that we send over taxation equalization, we send over $40 billion a year to Ottawa. We've put in $622 billion since the beginning of the equalization program. And all we're being told is that our oil is dirty, that we're being, ungrateful little children, that type of thing. In Alberta, we have 34 seats within the House of Commons. To contrast that with Ontario, there are 121. To contrast that with Quebec, there are 78. Just in the city of Toronto alone, there are 25 seats. And in the city of Montreal alone, there are 10. So those two cities whose their political and their economic interests are fundamentally opposed to ours in Alberta outvote us 35 to 34. Right now, our federal vote does not count.
So, Peter, do you believe a big reason why you want out of Confederation, and a lot of others too, is because economically and politically it really favors Eastern Canada?
Yes, it does. Obviously, just the numbers again there is that combined with Ontario and Quebec is 199 seats. Alberta has 34. And when you're looking at aging populations in Eastern Canada, Alberta has the youngest demographic. Right now, you have the largest portion of folks who are leaving the workforce right now. They're the highest paying part of their taxes, and they're going to be not paying taxes anymore and drawing down on social services. So it's an upside down pyramid. If you look at the quote unquote green initiatives that I listened to Elizabeth May just last Saturday on the radio, and she said very clearly that the carbon tax has to go up year over year over year. The interviewer asked, when will it stop? Well, it will never stop. And the reason is because it guarantees a dividend for Canadians, which is called guaranteed basic income. We've heard that term before, basically getting something for nothing. And the second part of it is retrofitting aging buildings in Eastern Canada. Think about the Galen Weston's Loblaws Corporation, very friendly Liberal donors, received $12 million in taxpayer funding for high efficiency refrigerators that they could easily afford. So this divide between socialism and crony capitalism, again, we have no say. Our federal vote doesn't count. And there's also, it's not just the economics and the politics. There's also a cultural distinction. It's a little bit different than the Quebec referendum of the 1990s, which was based on nationality and language. But here, I think it's part of the undertone is the values. And the values that we have in Western Canada. We are hardworking, decent people who don't want to take what we haven't earned from our neighbors, from our friends. If I want something for my family, I don't want to take it from my next door neighbor. I want to be able to, family is the number one social service, and it doesn't cost the taxpayer a cent.
Do you believe strongly if Alberta kept back those transfer payments that it could be self-sufficient, self-sustaining?
Absolutely. You could look at Jack Mintz, noted economist from the University of Calgary, said that Alberta has more economic reasons and there's more benefit to leaving what we call the Canadian Confederation than the United Kingdom has from leaving the European Union.
Now, you've held some meetings to gather support here. Former Harper government cabinet minister Jay Hill attended one of the meetings. Is he supporting your movement, and are other current or former politicians jumping on board?
Well, I can't speak. I'll allow Jay to speak for himself. I'll echo the sentiment that he said is obviously not to take the separatist movement lightly. And from speaking from conservative grassroots, blue collar and conservatives, educated professionals from all walks across industry, whether it be energy, agriculture, healthcare, law, finance, they're saying the same thing is that, I'm a proud Canadian. They're saying they're proud Canadians right now, and they remain so. But if Justin Trudeau gets elected on October 21st, they'll be supporting the Wexit movement and separatism on October 22nd. We will not live through another 4 years of Justin Trudeau. We're not tolerating that, and we are going to explore every option available for us right now. The province of Albertans have given Jason Kenney and the UCP a very strong, a very clear mandate to be able to fix Confederation, to get pipelines, to stop the economic abuse. But if he's not able to deliver what they want, they're going to be voting Wexit next time around.
So, Peter, let's chit-chat a bit about your political platform. How would you administer taxes?
Well, there are three key components we are Indigenous and non-Indigenous Albertans who've come together voluntarily for three main principles. The first is economic liberty. So if you take a look at whether it be taxation or regulation, it can be dealt with in the same vein, is really what is required to deliver essential public services: police, fire, ambulance, military, revenue services, education, healthcare, roadway construction. What it wouldn't be for, one of the problems you're dealing with down in Lethbridge, is your supervised injection clinic. We firmly, and I've worked in Christian missions and homeless shelters, and I can tell you firmly, the people who want to get clean can't get clean because they're tempted all over the place by the easy access to drugs, to needles, that sort of thing. We want to take the $40 billion, the $41 billion we're sending here to Ottawa, to be able to invest in infrastructure to help our friends and neighbors who are addicted to narcotics, to opiates, to be able to get clean, to be able to get the psychological, the emotional support they need, jobs, trainings, anything like that to help them be marketable and to be successful after they leave treatment. And that's usually when people tend to fall off the rails, is after they leave the treatment program. So we want to be able to invest in those programs which actually solve a problem and then give us increased returns in terms of saving money on hospital visits and ambulance trips, police investigations, son death, all these things that I've investigated as a police officer and know the back end costs, the court visits, the lawyers, all that stuff that's a major drain on the system. And we're looking at taking care of the problem upstream. We can only do that when we're not sending our tax money to Ottawa to be spent overseas or any kind of new social justice plan or whatever you typically see on the political left. Is we're using economic liberty and fiscal conservatism to actually solve social problems and to leave, if the government can't do more for you than you can do with your own dollar, we have a moral obligation to leave that dollar alone or to give it back to you.
Would you look at merging Alberta's various separatist groups into one group and run candidates in any upcoming federal and provincial by-elections? What kind of response have you received so far?
So we've reached out. Actually, there have been a number of folks from the other groups, the other separatist groups or smaller conservative groups that have reached out to us. And it's a work in progress. There's personality conflicts. I mean, talk about why there's so many churches and there's divisions between those churches is sometimes everybody believes the same thing, but sometimes personality conflicts come into play. And it really just takes time and patience. And to be able to be willing to see that through. Yes, we are going to be running a full slate of candidates in the next provincial election or by-elections that are bound to come up over the next 4 years. And federally, one of the next steps or the next level of the movement is to be able to have federal representation. That's not our main concern, but again, like the Bloc, the Parti Québécois currently has the Bloc Québécois. We're looking at the same options so that our voices aren't just heard across Western Canada, but all across Canada and especially into Central and Eastern Canada.
Now, in order to become registered as a political party in Alberta, you need to either run 44 candidates in a general election or collect around 7,800 signatures on a petition form. Are you getting anywhere with either one of those?
Both. We're in the process right now of identifying, recruiting, soft penciling MLA candidates in, again, across all 87 ridings. We're in the process right now. We've already, at each of our events, we're collecting signatures. We have, you may be aware, we have a very large event going on this coming Saturday in Lloydminster. And it's a get-together between Wexit, Alberta and Wexit, Saskatchewan, which is a sister separatist movement in Saskatchewan. And we've oversold and we had to get a bigger room. We've actually doubled our the folks who've signed up to join us. So it's basically the two events that we had in Red Deer and Calgary the other weekend. we've got more than that coming up just in Lloydminster alone. So the movement's moving forward. We're getting our signatures. We're going out. We're meeting people. We're talking to people about the things that are really important to them. Because, again, it's our values that lead the organization. It's not just about leaving Canada or determining, again, we're not picking up our country and physically moving it. We're talking about Albertans governing Alberta for Albertans. And it's led by those three values: economic liberty, social stability, and Alberta sovereignty.
Now, how would that actually work, though, when it comes to the armed forces, federal judiciary, a healthcare system, a pension plan? There's a lot of work that goes into forming your own country.
There is, but it also offers a lot more stability for the folks here in Alberta. If you look at the national defense budget of roughly about $20 billion a year, again, we're sending $40 billion, $41 billion to Ottawa each year. Not to mention being able to unlock our natural resources, being able to get the revenue that we should be, with crude oil demand increasing 1.5% each year. There is a demand on the world market for Alberta oil. We are able to fund it. We're able to stand up an effective military service. If you look at pension right now, major liability, when the government's talking about guaranteed basic income, where do you think all that's going to come from? When they want to sell $25,000 a year that to everybody across the country who hasn't earned it, where do you think that money is going to come from? It's going to deplete the Canadian pension plans that currently stands. We're talking about, again, with upside down demographics in the rest of the country, with Alberta having the youngest demographics, a locally administered Alberta pension plan would not only be better funded and not making risky investments into places like Mumbai, India housing corporations, or possibly being pilfered for guaranteed basic income projects, but we also have the portability. Right now, if a couple, God forbid, they're to die in a car crash, that money doesn't transfer to their survivors or to their children. The government keeps it as it stands right now. So we're looking at, again, doing what's right for people so that they can have their own money.
I remember when Quebec was talking about separation, of course, the referendum and so forth, a lot of people were saying, well, as long as you take your portion of the debt. So is that going to be an issue for Alberta too, if it separates, becomes its own country?
Albertans have put $622 billion into the equalization program since the 1950s when it first started. We've paid our bill. And if Canada has their queen who owns 1/6 of planet Earth, she can take care of the rest.
What about Alberta being a landlocked country, province? Now, how would you actually get your products exported and imported?
The irony when it comes to the quote-unquote landlocked status is that as a coastal nation, or a country with access to the coast, Canada has the ability to restrict, again, even though it's unconstitutional, they have the ability to restrict exports to. They're currently locking our oil in the ground. As a landlocked nation, Alberta would actually have access to the coast because Canada has been a signatory to the UN Convention on the Law of the Seas, Article 10, since the 1970s, which allows landlocked countries like Switzerland and Europe to be able to get their products and resources out to coasts for trade. And Canada would have to abide by international law. So we would actually have more sovereignty over our resources as being independent and more access to the coast as being an independent nation. The other side of it, too, is it works both ways. British Columbia is going to want to be able to have their ground and air commerce through Alberta ground and airspace to the rest of Canada. The rest of Canada is going to want to be able to transport through Alberta ground and airspace to get their manufactured goods out for coastal shipping. So it really does work both ways. Alberta is actually, when we recognize the full extent of our geopolitical leverage, we're in a fantastic position.
So if Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and the Liberals get re-elected this fall, to what degree would the separatist movement really gain support?
It would explode overnight.
So a lot of people reaching out to you saying, how about not just Alberta, but why not team up with Saskatchewan and Manitoba and create a country with the three prairie provinces?
Well, absolutely. Unfortunately, and in common vernacular and in 21st century, people have experienced bad relationships and they get out of bad relationships. And sometimes they need a sense of identity on their own before they say, okay, who am I going to team up with next type thing. So I think there's a little bit of that psychological piece for Albertans to get a sense of who we are a little bit more. At the same time, we look at like-minded provinces and economies, resource-based economies like Saskatchewan. And as I mentioned earlier on, there is a Wexit Saskatchewan movement that we have a joint meeting in Lloydminster on the border city this coming Saturday. And we look at the potential in a province like Manitoba, typically have voted Liberal, and they have major government centres. The Canada Revenue Agency is based out of Winnipeg. But if you look at the underdeveloped northern part of that province, who they have some real social problems that stem from poverty, through a logistics infrastructure to be built up towards the port, the Churchill port, for exports to Europe. It would just bring so much wealth to that area, and it would just be good for everybody for so many reasons. So we're looking at that in the future, and obviously each province needs to develop their own political response individually, but we definitely look for opportunities. Again, it's Albertans will decide that, and at the same time, we're building the Wexit, and we're already building those relationships so that we have good relationships with the other provinces, whether it's as a joint confederation or whether it's separately.
Peter Downing, the founder of Wexit Alberta, thanks a lot for your time today from Edmonton.
Thank you, Hal.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless and have a great night.